Melissa Carter was the TikTok mom everyone admired. Daniel Carter was the husband who wanted nothing to do with her online world. And Lily Carter was the teenage daughter who refused to play along but behind the smiling videos and perfect image. Their story ended in a crime so shocking it turned a family brand into a true crime nightmare. Melissa Carter was known in her town as the woman who had it all together. Two strangers scrolling on TikTok, she was a ray of light, always cheerful, always smiling, always ready to share little tips on cooking, parenting, or home decorating. Her videos felt comforting, like a window into the life of someone who had mastered the art of being a mother and a wife. The comments beneath her clips overflowed with admiration. "You're such an inspiration. I wish I could be like you. Your family is so perfect." That was the image Melissa wanted the world to see, and she guarded it with her entire being. But behind the polished clips and playful transitions, the truth was quietly eating her alive. Inside the Carter household, cracks were widening every day. Bills stacked up on the kitchen counter, credit card debt rising silently while Melissa bought props to make her videos look more appealing. Her husband, Daniel, grew distant, tired of the constant filming and the pressure to smile when the camera was on. Their daughter, Lily, once the bright star of Melissa's family content, had grown resentful. At 15, she no longer wanted to appear in staged clips where her laughter was rehearsed and her movements choreographed. The happy family that millions saw online was nothing more than carefully framed moments, edited until they looked flawless. Melissa felt the weight of it every night when the camera was off. She would sit alone in the living room, staring at the comments that praised her life, while in the next room Daniel slept facing the wall, silent and cold. The emptiness gnawed at her. To the outside world, she was adored. In her own home, she felt invisible. Each day, she forced herself to put on the mask again, arranging her face into a smile, holding her phone at the perfect angle, and speaking with the energy of someone who had nothing to hide. Neighbors noticed the difference long before her followers did. On quiet evenings, they heard shouting through thin walls, arguments that grew so loud, windows rattled. Sometimes Melissa would be spotted outside, walking quickly down the street in her slippers, muttering to herself, her arms wrapped tight, as if holding herself together. But in her next upload, she would be back in her tidy kitchen, holding up a tray of cookies, captioning it with cheerful lines like baking away the stress. Nobody thought too deeply about it. Everyone believed what they saw on their screens. As time went on, stress of maintaining two separate lives began to twist Melissa's thoughts. She started to feel like her videos were the only place where she truly existed. The likes and shares felt more real than conversations with her own husband, more comforting than the cold silence in her home. Every comment praising her made the other half of her life, the dark, messy, failing, half feel intolerable. She hated the idea of people ever discovering the truth, of the image she had built collapsing under the weight of reality. It was during these months of quiet breakdowns that Melissa began leaving hints in her content, though most people didn't recognize them at the time. She filmed less in daylight, favoring dim, shadowed rooms. Her captions carried odd undertones, little phrases like starting over or escaping it all. The smile never completely vanished, but her eyes told another story, dull, exhausted, and desperate. Few followers asked if she was okay, but she brushed them off with light-hearted replies. After all, the show had to go on. What no one realized then was how much Melissa had started to despise the very people closest to her, the ones who had once made her videos charming and relatable. Daniel's refusal to play along, Lily's growing independence, the bills that threatened to unravel the carefully staged delusional of it, felt like sabotage. In her mind, they weren't just part of her private struggles. They were obstacles standing in the way of her picture-perfect life. And though no one could have imagined it at the time, Melissa was already beginning to think about how to remove those obstacles forever. Melissa's followers first noticed the change in her tone long before they understood its meaning. At the beginning, the differences were small enough to dismiss. Her videos looked the same, with cheerful backdrops and upbeat music, but there was something in her face that seemed off. The smile lingered a second too long, and her eyes had a heaviness that couldn't be hidden by filters. She laughed at her own jokes, but the sound felt hollow, like she was laughing to cover something else. Comments began to appear, asking if she was tired, if everything was okay at home, if maybe she needed a break. Melissa replied with playful emojis and casual reassurances. But the cracks were becoming harder to ignore. The shift deepened when she began experimenting with darker themes. Instead of her sunlit kitchen, she started filming in the corner of her living room at night, using only a lamp for lighting. The music she once chose was bubbly and bright, but now her videos played against eerie tracks or slowed-down pop songs that gave everything a strange, unsettling edge. Captions turned cryptic. Where she once wrote about family dinners and little moments of joy, she began writing phrases like "a new chapter is coming," or "sometimes you have to burn everything down to rise again." Her audience debated endlessly in the comments. Some thought she was marketing a big rebrand, others suspected she was going through depression, and a few guessed it was just a way to boost engagement. The truth was far darker. Behind closed doors, Melissa was unraveling at a speed no one could stop. Her arguments with Daniel grew more vicious. He had started sleeping in the guest room, avoiding her at all costs, while Lily spent more time at friends' houses, desperate. To escape the tension at home, Melissa saw their absence as betrayal. She clung harder to her online presence, scrolling through likes late into the night, convincing herself that her followers loved her in a way her own family never had. Illusion became her lifeline, and she began to resent anything that threatened it. One of her last viral uploads set the internet buzzing. Melissa stood in her kitchen, hair disheveled, makeup barely done. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, as she spoke directly to the camera. "This is the last time you'll see me like this." She didn't elaborate. The video ended with her staring at the lens, unblinking, for a full 10 seconds before cutting to black. Within hours, it was shared across TikTok and beyond. Theories flooded social media. Some were sure she was teasing a new direction for her content. Others claimed she was leaving her husband or announcing a major life change. A smaller, more concerned group worried that it was a cry for help. None of them knew that Melissa had already made up her mind about what came next. Her disappearance from TikTok after that video only heightened the speculation. For days, her account remained silent. Fans flooded her past posts with questions, asking when she would return. Some even drove by her neighborhood, hoping to catch a glimpse of her for proof she was okay. But inside her home, Melissa was planning. She began cleaning obsessively, writing lists, and keeping her phone close, as if it were her only ally. To her, the silence online wasn't absence, it was preparation. Melissa's countdown wasn't visible in numbers, but it pulsed through her behavior. She stopped shopping with Lily. She stopped answering calls from friends. She stopped caring about whether Daniel noticed her strange routines. She was working toward an ending that only she could see. When it came, it wouldn't just shock her followers. It would destroy everything her carefully crafted image had ever stood for. The night everything changed began in an unsettlingly ordinary way. It was a Friday evening, the kind of night that should have felt calm after a long week. The Carter house looked quiet from the outside, just another suburban home with its lights glowing warmly through the windows. Neighbors were settling in for dinner, televisions flickering in living rooms, children playing in yards before the sun set. Nothing about the stillness suggested the violence about to unfold inside. But Melissa had been preparing for this moment, and she moved through her kitchen with a cold determination that no one could see. She had spent the day filming short clips, recording herself chopping vegetables, setting the table, and stirring pots on the stove. To anyone who might later find the drafts on her phone, it looked like the setup for another family-centered TikTok. In reality, she was documenting the final hours of her family's life. The ingredients on the counter weren't chosen for flavor or aesthetics. Hidden among them was the poison she had researched weeks before. Something lethal but difficult to detect, mixed carefully into the food. Her hands were steady, her face unreadable as she plated the meal. When Daniel came home, he looked exhausted. He barely spoke to Melissa, retreating to his usual silence. Lily joined them reluctantly, scrolling on her phone at the table, annoyed at being forced into another dinner together. The atmosphere was tense, but familiar. The three of them had shared many nights like this, each going through the motions. A family life, without connection. None of them noticed the way Melissa studied their faces as they ate. None of them realized they were consuming more than just a meal. The poison worked quietly at first. Daniel grew pale, complaining of dizziness. Lily pushed her plate away, saying she didn't feel well. Melissa watched them with a stillness that felt unnatural. Her eyes fixed on their movements, her body frozen as though waiting for confirmation. Within minutes, the symptoms grew worse. Daniel slumped forward, struggling to breathe, while Lily's phone slipped from her hand as she doubled over in pain. The house that once echoed with arguments now filled with the sounds of choking and gasping. Melissa did not call for help. She did not move toward them. Instead, she picked up her phone again, angling the camera toward herself, capturing her face in the glow of the kitchen light. When it was over, Melissa sat in the silence she had long craved. The weight of years of conflict and bitterness seemed to lift from her shoulders, but she knew silence alone wouldn't be enough. She had to erase the evidence, had to make sure no one could piece together the truth. She opened cabinets, pulled out matches, and began setting small fires throughout the house, hoping the flames would consume everything. Curtains caught quickly, smoke curling into the air. But Melissa miscalculated. The fire didn't spread as she expected. Instead, it lingered in patches, producing more smoke than destruction. The neighbors were the first to notice. Smoke rising from the Carter home looked out of place against the clear evening sky. Calls to emergency services came in within minutes, reporting the strange smell and the faint glow of fire. When firefighters arrived, they pushed through the smoke-filled rooms and found the grim scene Melissa had left behind. The bodies of Daniel and Lily lay in the kitchen, untouched by the flames. The fire had damaged parts of the house, but the evidence Melissa had hoped to destroy remained intact. As investigators began to piece together what happened, Melissa was already gone. She had slipped out of the house before the smoke grew too thick, vanishing into the night without alerting anyone. Her absence made the scene even more chilling. To those who entered the home, it was clear this was not an accident. It was deliberate, calculated, and marked by the eerie presence of a camera left behind on the counter, its memory holding secrets that would soon horrify the world. The discovery of Melissa's phone was the moment. The investigation shifted from tragedy to nightmare. Amid the charred kitchen and smoke-stained walls, detectives recovered the device lying on the counter, protected by a case that kept it from being destroyed in the fire. At first, they expected it to contain the usual family photos, text messages, and maybe records of arguments between Melissa and Daniel. What they found instead left even seasoned investigators shaken. The phone was filled with draft videos, none of them shared publicly, each documenting pieces of the evening as if Melissa had been creating content for her followers. It was a chilling performance staged for an audience that would never see it. The first draft showed Melissa preparing dinner. Her tone was eerily calm as she narrated simple tasks like chopping vegetables and seasoning the meat. On the surface, it looked like any of her previous cooking tutorials, but investigators noticed her hands lingered unnaturally over the food. In one frame, the camera caught a brief glimpse of a small container being emptied into the pot, quickly pushed aside before it could be clearly identified. To a casual viewer, it would have seemed insignificant, but to detectives, it was the smoking gun. She had filmed herself adding poison, documenting the very act of murder. The next draft was more unsettling. Melissa positioned the camera to capture the dining table where Daniel and Lily sat, unaware of what was in front of them. The video was brief, almost clumsy, ending before anything obvious happened, but there was enough to send chills through anyone watching. Daniel looked tired, barely glancing at the camera, while Lily rolled her eyes in the way only teenagers could. In the background, Melissa's reflection appeared faintly in the glass of a picture frame, watching them with an intensity that made the footage disturbing beyond words. It was not a family dinner. It was a trap carefully disguised as normality. The most horrifying draft was the final one. Melissa turned the phone toward herself, her face illuminated by the kitchen light as smoke began to curl in the background. She looked directly into the lens, her expression blank, her voice low but steady. "They'll never hurt me again," she whispered.
Out.
"Watch me start over." Then she smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that stretched across her face before the clip abruptly ended. It was not just a confession, it was a declaration, recorded with the same energy she once used to charm her audience. She had framed the murders not as a crime, but as content. Investigators knew instantly the videos could never be released to the public. To show them would risk turning Melissa into a morbid sensation, fueling the same hunger for spectacle that had fed her rise as a TikTok personality. Still, descriptions of the footage leaked to the media, and soon the story dominated headlines. Reporters described the chilling last video in grim detail, calling it one of the most disturbing pieces of digital evidence ever uncovered in a family crime. Social media, the very stage where Melissa had built her image, now turned into a space of horror. With her followers questioning how they had missed the warning signs in her earlier uploads, the phone also revealed something else that unsettled detectives even more. In her Notes app, Melissa had written lists meticulous outlines of her plan, including the type of poison, the timing of the meal, and even reminders about camera angles. It was not the desperate act of someone who snapped in the moment. It was calculated, rehearsed, and orchestrated as if it were another TikTok series meant to entertain. Every step suggested she wanted her crime remembered not just as violence, but as a performance. For investigators, the footage erased any doubt about her guilt, but it also raised a darker question. Melissa had not just killed her family. She had used the tools of her online persona to turn the act into content. It blurred the line between her public and private selves, leaving many to wonder whether she had ever truly separated the two. To her followers, the videos they once adored now felt tainted. Every cheerful post retroactively shadowed by the knowledge of what she was capable of. The smiling mother with baking tips and motivational quotes was gone, replaced by the cold figure who had whispered her intent into a camera while her family lay dying behind her. Melissa was found the following morning in a roadside motel, less than an hour away from her neighborhood. The staff had reported her strange behavior to local authorities, describing how she checked in without luggage, paid in cash, and sat on the edge of the bed for hours without moving.
Ow!
When officers entered the room, she didn't resist. She looked at them with a calm, vacant expression, as though she had been waiting for their arrival. Her only belongings were her phone charger, a notebook, and a half-empty water bottle. On the desk sat a motel notepad covered in scribbles that made little sense, phrases like rebirth, clean slate, and this is peace. She was taken into custody without incident, showing no signs of remorse, no shock, no attempt to deny what she had done. At the police station, detectives were struck by how detached she seemed. While most people confronted with the gravity of their crimes show panic, guilt, or at least fear, Melissa behaved as though she were in an interview, speaking carefully, and often looking toward the camera recording her confession. She admitted to poisoning Daniel and Lily, describing her actions in the same measured tone she once used to explain recipes online. When asked why, her response was chilling in its simplicity. "I just wanted peace. It kept me from peace." It was a phrase she repeated multiple times during questioning. It's almost like a mantra. The case moved quickly once prosecutors gathered the evidence. The toxicology reports matched the substance found in her kitchen, the videos on her phone, provided undeniable proof, and her own confession sealed the outcome. During the trial, the courtroom filled with journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and even a handful of her former followers, curious to see the woman they had once admired. Melissa appeared in court wearing plain prison attire, but she carried herself with the same poise she had online, standing tall, looking directly at the cameras, and never breaking down. Her demeanor unsettled everyone in attendance, as though she still considered herself a performer with an audience to impress. The prosecution painted her as a woman consumed by vanity and resentment, someone who valued her public image more than the lives of her own family. They described how her obsession with controlling her appearance online spilled into her private life, eventually leading her to erase the people who contradicted her carefully crafted identity. The defense tried to argue she was mentally unwell, suffering from the pressures of social media fame and the collapse of her marriage. But the meticulous planning documented on her phone made it clear she knew exactly what she was doing. When the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts, Melissa showed no reaction. She didn't cry, she didn't plead, and she didn't lash out. She simply nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the end of a performance. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, condemning her to spend the rest of her days behind bars. Yet even in that moment, the chilling finality of the sentence felt incomplete. Melissa remained unreadable, as though prison was not a punishment but simply another stage in her story. In the aftermath, the community struggled to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the reality of her crimes. Neighbors who once waved to her across the street now spoke about the unease they had ignored, the glimpses of something darker behind her smile. Her followers flooded TikTok with reaction videos, analyzing her old posts for clues they had missed. Every cheerful upload was rewatched with suspicion, every caption scrutinized for hidden meaning. The platform that had once elevated her into a figure of admiration now became the place where her downfall was dissected piece by piece. To this day, the case is remembered not only for the brutality of the crime, but for the eerie way it was documented. Melissa's final drafts, never meant for public release, linger as some of the most disturbing digital evidence investigators have ever encountered. The smiling mother-turned-killer became a cautionary tale about the dangers of living for an audience, of building a life that exists only for the approval of strangers. For those who once looked up to her, the memory of Melissa Carter is not of her cheerful tutorials or her picture-perfect home, but of the haunting moment she stared into a camera and promised to start over. That single phrase remains frozen in time, echoing as a reminder that not everything shown online is what it seems, and sometimes, behind the smile, something unspeakable waits to be revealed.